What's good, y'all? And welcome to another preseason preview video. In today's video, we're going over the Memphis Grizzlies. In case this is your first preseason preview video of mine that you're seeing, basically what I do is go through all the offseason moves, give a little recap there, and then look into the future to try to see what we can expect from each team. Before we get into it, I want to remind you guys to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. Once you're done watching this video, make sure you check out the description. There's a link there that'll bring you to a playlist of all the other preseason preview videos I've done so far. And without further ado, let's take a look at the additions the Memphis Grizzlies made this offseason. The Grizzlies didn't make many moves in free agency, but they did make a big splash in the draft, drafting two-time AP Player of the Year Zack Edy from Purdue. So I gotta be honest, going into the draft, I was pretty low on Zack Edy. I didn't know how well he would translate to the NBA. You know, he's super big, being 7'3", slow-footed, solid body. You know, I was really worried on if he would just get picked apart on defense in the pick and roll. You know, he hasn't really shown too much in college that he can guard in space. But I'm slowly changing my mind on this draft pick. There's still plenty of things that Zack brings to the table that I think the Grizzlies are really going to benefit from. First off is his size. I mentioned before, he is 7'3", super solid body too, not like a lanky, skinny 7'3" like a Porzingis or something. You know, he has muscle on him, super huge body, allows him to be a fantastic rebounder, which is the number one thing that I think he'll really benefit the Grizzlies with. You know, Jaren Jackson Jr. being their center, he's not the best rebounder in the world, so he will be sliding over to power forward, and Zack Edy will be able to be there and grab all of the rebounds. And I mentioned that I was a little bit worried about him defensively, at least guarding in space. When you look at him as just a pure rim protector, he is incredibly good at that. He is good at using his size, his height, his length to block shots, to deter players from even attempting shots, and I think that he's going to do incredibly well at that at the NBA level, especially when you pair him alongside another great shot blocker like Jaren Jackson Jr. I think that's going to be fine. I was more worried about him guarding a pick and roll or getting switched out to the perimeter, but I will say, I know he was hurt for a majority of Summer League. He did play a few of those games in the Salt Lake City Classic, and he looked really mobile there. I don't want to say really. He looked way more mobile, though. He was able to slide his feet faster than I've seen. I don't know if he's dropped weight or if he's just training differently. Whatever it is, he looked more solid and looked like he would be able to hold up a little bit better than my first initial thoughts. And that's definitely a good thing. It's helping me turn from hating the pick to becoming more neutral. I definitely still want to see him on the NBA court and against other NBA talent. And I want to watch it a little bit and see how I feel to fully formulate my opinion. But he's definitely doing a good job of warming me up. I'm definitely more neutral about the pick instead of hating it. And since the Grizzlies didn't really bring in too many people, they didn't lose too many people either. The one key piece that they lost was Zier Williams, though. He was traded to the Brooklyn Nets. This move didn't really surprise me. You know, Zier, even though he was a former 10th overall pick for the Grizzlies, he was never able to really become a super productive NBA player. He always had a lot of the tools, but it was never able to put it all together. And especially now, they have so many different wings that I feel like Zier just kind of got lost in the shuffle. He still is super young, so I like that they traded him to a rebuilding Brooklyn Nets team. He's going to be able to have some type of playing time, I would assume, there to maybe grow his game. The Grizzlies just have a lot of wing players that Zier just wouldn't get playing time over. You know, with the emergence of guys like Gigi Jackson or Vince Williams, even Luke Kennard you can throw in there, John Conchar. You know, there's a bunch of guys on this roster that are very similar in build and in skill set, and Zier just happened to be the guy left out. Now that we know who came and went, though, let's take a look at a potential rotation we could be seeing from the Memphis Grizzlies. I would say it's a lot of familiar faces here, but after last season with all the injuries, it's been a while since we've seen some of these guys on the court. In the starting lineup, though, of course, we have Ja Morant alongside Marcus Smart, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., and the rookie Zack Edy. And then coming off the bench, we have Vince Williams, Luke Kennard, Gigi Jackson, Santi Aldama, and Brandon Clark. I'm sure it sucked a lot to be a Grizzlies fan last year and have to endure injury after injury after injury and the team just not being good. But I feel like it was a blessing in disguise in a way, because it allowed some of these players to really show that they could be contributors to this team. The obvious guys there are Vince Williams and Gigi Jackson. Last year, Gigi Jackson was the youngest player in the NBA. He was a second-round pick. If the Grizzlies were fully healthy and still a contending team, he probably wouldn't get much playing time, if any. But because they had that next man up mentality, Gigi ended up getting a lot of minutes. He even made an all-rookie team last year. He was, I believe, 3rd in rookies in scoring. And now when he comes into his second season, he has all that experience that he had throughout all last year. He was able to play, I don't want to say pressure-free basketball, but he was able to play through all of his mistakes as a young rookie, young player. And I think that he's going to be a key contributor coming off the bench for the Grizzlies this year as a scorer. He has great length, so he can be different positions in the lineup. I'm excited to see him play next to Jaren, next to Ja, next to Desmond Bane, all of these other guys. And Vince Williams falls into that same category as well. His rookie season, he was a 2nd-round pick, barely got playing time, and then this year he was kind of thrust into the lineup halfway through the year. He started starting even after that, and his game, it just took off from there. A super versatile player. He can score the ball a little bit. Shooting is there. The defense is there. Passing, rebounding. Can literally do a little bit of everything, and I think he is going to definitely be a big part of the Grizzlies bench this year. But even guys that were already established, they were able to take on different roles to grow their game. A guy that comes to mind is Desmond Bane. A lot of the season before he even went down with injury, he was the #1 option on the Grizzlies. With no Ja Morant, it was basically his team. They gave him the keys and were like, all right, try to do what you could do. He was able to grow a lot as a self-creator, be able to get his own shots off with the ball in his hands. You know, we already knew that he was a great shooter, catch and shoot guy and all of that. Obviously, in years past, he has still been able to show that he can create for himself. But this year, he was on a whole nother level, getting to the rim. The mid-range game was there. The three-point shot, of course, like I mentioned before, he was able to build upon that. Even his playmaking took a little bit of a jump, and I feel like that's going to be really important because when Ja is back now and the defenses are going to be focusing on him, it's going to make Desmond's life just so much easier. I feel like Jaren Jackson Jr. could even be thrown into that type of situation as well. He had a very similar situation as Desmond Bane, just having more of an offensive load, having to create his own shot a little bit more than he's used to, and I just feel like that's great experience to have as a player because, again, like I said with Desmond, Ja's going to be back, all these other players are going to be taking the attention of the defense, and Jaren's going to be able to take advantage of it better now. And hopefully this season is as injury-free as possible for the Grizzlies. After last year, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I know G.G. Jackson, unfortunately, is kicking it off on the wrong foot. No pun intended there. But he did fracture his foot, I believe, so he had to get surgery done, and he will miss, I believe, 3 months-ish. He'll miss some time to start the season. In place of him in the rotation, I can expect maybe some Jake LaRavia or some John Conchar minutes. I could definitely see one of those guys absorbing some of those wing minutes. Or if they wanted to go in a different direction, I could see the Grizzlies giving Scottie Pippen Jr. some minutes. He's on a 2-way contract right now, but in the Summer League was hooping his ass off. Even last year, he had some games where he looked like a true NBA player and he could be an actual backup guard. So I could see them maybe just sliding everyone down a little bit, giving him some minutes. If not, though, definitely expect some John Conchar or some Jake LaRavia minutes. But the #1 reason I really hope there is no injuries on the Grizzlies is Ja Morant, man. It feels like forever that I've watched Ja Morant play basketball, and I miss it so badly. I'll never forget his first game after the suspension against the Pelicans. I was so excited to watch that game, and he showed out having the game winner against the Pelicans, and then a few games later, he dunked on Wembanyama. Like, he, in just 9 short games, had so many great moments. Then they had to, he tore his shoulder, ripped him back away from us. I'm just super excited to see Ja Morant play basketball again. And now that we have an idea of what this team looks like, let's take a look at their biggest strength. I don't think this should come as a surprise to anyone, but the Grizzlies defense is going to be absolutely incredible yet again. If you just look at years past, you can see their defense has always been top tier, but I think they could be even better this year. I feel like Taylor Jenkins might be one of the most underrated coaches in the NBA. I am super high on him. I think he does a great job with the Grizzlies. He is a disciple of Mike Budenholzer, who is notorious as a defensive coach, and you could see that in Taylor Jenkins because he is also a super defensive-minded coach. Ever since he came to the Grizzlies, starting in his second year, they've had a top 6 defense. That is, of course, not including last year because they had all of the injuries. Obviously, you would expect them to drop, but despite so many guys in and out of the lineup, Taylor Jenkins was able to keep the Grizzlies defense above average, and they ranked 12th in defensive rating. And again, I think that's a huge testament to Taylor Jenkins and his coaching, as well as the system that he put in place here for the Grizzlies on defense. And I feel like they have the perfect players to really execute that system. He has a few simple but effective ideologies on defense. That's to have a hounding perimeter defender, you limit the opponent's shots at the rim, and you force turnovers. Again, sounds very simple, but the Grizzlies do a great job at executing it. I don't know if you can really name a more hounding perimeter defender than Marcus Smart. He won his Defensive Player of the Year while just being a super scrappy, get under your skin defender, and now he's going to be able to come to Memphis and instill that. I'm really upset that we only got 20 games from him last year, but again, hopefully this year it's just all health. Even beyond Marcus Smart and his super physical defensive capabilities, I still really am high on Vince Williams, and I think that he could be another great perimeter defender on this team. Of course, he won't be anywhere near Marcus Smart's level, but I think he's just another guy you can throw on the best perimeter player on some nights. Then when you look at how they limit shots at the rim, usually it's just Jaren Jackson Jr. down there, and he just blocks everything that comes their way. Of course, they always have solid backup bigs. A guy like Brandon Clark, he's their backup big now that they moved away from Xavier Tillman. I think Brandon Clark does a very solid job defensively. But even beyond that, besides just having Jaren Jackson Jr. down there blocking shots, they now have Zack Edy, like I mentioned before when talking about him. He, as 6'4", super long arm, super big body, great shot blocker. I don't really know what opposing teams are going to do. They finally get to the basket. They have Jaren Jackson Jr. on this side. They have Zack Edy on that side. Like, you're just not going to get the shot off, respectfully. And then when it comes to the forcing turnovers thing, they have so many high-level athletes on this team that it just looks easy for them. Of course, guys like Marcus and Jaren Jackson, they're always going to get you some steals and get in the passing lanes. But then also Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, these guys, you wouldn't look to be as great defenders, but they will definitely get into those passing lanes, poke the ball away here and there. Even Vince Williams or Brandon Clark, these guys will get there too, get active on defense. All around, defensively, I'm super excited to see this team play. And then arguably the most important part of defense is getting the rebound and closing out the possession. Last year, they struggled a lot because mainly it was just Jaren Jackson Jr. out there, and he's just not a good rebounder. Now they have Zack Edy, who I'm very confident is going to just help fix the rebounding damn near by himself. But also that puts Jaren in a position where he's more just helping out on the boards instead of having to get them all. Also, guys like Santi Aldama, I think, is pretty underrated as a rebounder. I keep bringing up Vince Williams, but I think he is also pretty underrated as a rebounder as well. They might not have Dylan Brooks anymore, but they definitely are still going to have that defensive identity. And now that we've looked at the strengths of the Grizzlies, we got to take a look at the opposite side of the spectrum and look at their biggest weakness. Here I have the Grizzlies rotational players in order of how many three-point attempts they had per game last year. I also have their three-point percentage colored by above or below average. Last year, league average three-point percentage was 36.6%. As you can see, they don't have many above average three-point shooters. Now, it's not like the Grizzlies don't have any shooting at all. Desmond Bane and Luke Kennard are some of the best three-point shooters in the league. I am very confident in their shooting capabilities. I'm confident calling them elite shooters, and they can both get their shots off in a variety of ways. They both are great catch and shoot guys from anywhere on the court. I'm very confident in that capability. But then also when you look at a guy like Luke Kennard, he's a great movement shooter. He can be coming off screens and, just getting the easy look off the movements, or just moving into open space just while the defense is rotating, finding that space, catch, shoot, knock down like that. And then in contrast, I was just talking before about how Desmond Bane has grown his game even more to become a on-ball threat shooting the ball. So they could definitely be in a way worse situation. I definitely think both of these guys are super elite shooters. Vince Williams Jr., he's going to be the star of this video at this point, I guess. But he is a solid shooter. He knocks it down at a respectable rate. But given that all three of those guys are pretty much the same height and play basically the same position of either shooting guard or small forward, at the absolute most, only 2 out of the 3 of those guys can be on the court at any given moment. That makes it real simple to just collapse into the paint. And when your main guy is Ja Morant, who's one of the most prolific paint scorers in the NBA, you want that paint to be as open as possible. I do also want to give a quick shout out to Gigi Jackson because he was less than 1 percentage point away from becoming an average or above average shooter. So I do have faith in him as a shooter. He shot a high volume last year, and he went through, some stretches where he could not miss, and then he went through some stretches where he could not hit a shot. I think that comes with the growing pains of being a young rookie. So coming into year 2, I would look for him to be a little bit more consistent, and if he's able to get that three-point shot up a little bit, he would be a huge help considering his length and the different positions he could play. They can run a lineup out there where he's the power forward or the small forward. He just gives them more ability to put more shooting around Ja Morant. And since we're on the topic of spacing, now that they're going to be running a lot of minutes of Zack Edy and Jaren Jackson Jr. together, that kind of shrinks the court even more. I know there's been some rumors of Zack Edy working on his jump shot and becoming a decent shooter. I'll wait till I see it on the court to believe it. And I don't want to discredit Jaren too much because he is a stretch big, I guess you can call him. Teams respect him as a shooter and will guard him. They'll guard his jump shot. But at the end of the day, if it's not going in, it's not really helping your team. And now it is time for the fan segment. And here representing the Memphis Grizzlies, I have my boy Eli here. Thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, let's just jump right into it. The Grizzlies didn't really have many moves that they made this offseason, but I'm still interested to see what where your head's at. What has been your favorite offseason move that they've done?
I would say it's tough. Like you said, we didn't really make moves, so it's kind of tough to say. I think Luke Kennard re-signed for a year was good. I like to do it. It's expendable at the trade deadline, so that's nice. 1 year, $8 million, can't complain. I think we stayed under the first apron too. I'm still skeptical about Edy, but I like the pick because we stayed where we were at 9. So I mean, it feels like the coaching staff was comfortable with that pick. I'm not mad at that either. And then I think my favorite move though was just the reconstruction of the coaching staff. I think we got rid of every assistant but Anthony Carter and replaced the entire staff completely. So I like that. You're still keeping Taylor Jenkins, but you're letting him get a whole new staff, so I think that's going to be big. And because obviously we had a few assistants go on to be head coaches. So
I'm pretty high on Taylor Jenkins. I feel like he's pretty underrated as a coach in general. I feel like a lot of times when I was watching the Grizzlies last year, even though you guys were such a depleted team, he would have them playing hard and playing competitive, and I feel like that's a big testament to him. Like you said, though, you kind of touched upon it. My favorite move would probably be just the Luke Kennard re-signing. I know they had to jump through a few hoops to get it done, and they traded Zier Williams to open up some cap space. He declined his player option, got him back on a pretty good deal. He's one of the top shooters in the NBA, and I feel like for just $11 million, I believe it was, it's great value there. And kind of like what you said, too, I am a little bit skeptical about Edy and his translation to the NBA, but I feel like you guys are damn near the perfect fit for him where he can just hold down the defense in the paint, rebound, give you size, because that's been a pretty big thing too ever since not having Steven Adams. So I'm kind of indifferent, I guess, with the Zack Edy because at first I hated it. Now I'm kind of warming up to it. But all around, yeah, it's been a relatively quiet offseason in Memphis. And then moving on to this next question here, who do you think is the most underrated player on the Grizzlies?
I think it's tough because to me, there's different forms of underrated. Like, I think Desmond Bane's an underrated player, but it's like everyone knows Desmond Bane's a great player. It's just, I don't think they recognize like how good he is. But I think if we're talking like genuinely underrated on just a radar where I feel like people don't even pay attention at all, I think Vince Williams Jr. He was huge last year. Just coming in, didn't even play to start the year, just gets thrown out there. Next thing you know, I'm favorable Marcus starting at small forward spot, but I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Vince start. So I think just his defense, and I think his playmaking is underrated too. Like, I feel like it just kind of flew under the radar, like how good of a passer he is, how good a connected passer he is. So that was big. And then the second guy, and kind of third guy, I would say Scottie Pippen Jr., but I know the Summer League kind of puts people on. But people don't realize 40% three-point shooter. That's what people don't realize. So I think he can play off the ball as well. So I can see a lot of, Scottie minutes together. Right, and then I can see him be the backup point guard that we, losing ties obviously last year or a few years back. It's good to see that we have a backup point guard again in him. And then third player, I think Brandon Clark. I think the Achilles injury definitely changed some things, but I mean, when I seen the 9 games from him last year, I think he's good to go, and I think a full off season and recovery is going to help him a ton. And I think people don't realize just how good of a backup center he is. And if the Edy thing in the playoffs, he gets played off the floor. I've seen it before in the playoffs that Brandon Clark can fill in and give you 25 great minutes besides Jaren. So I think he's definitely one of the most underrated players too.
Yeah, for sure. Him being out for majority of the season, a lot like, throughout everyone basically on your roster, it felt like last year,
Yeah.
just you couldn't get any continuity going, but I am excited to see him alongside with the healthy roster. My pick was Vince Williams, though. I feel like you said, when you talk about like under radar guys that like, people kind of overlook. I know his rookie season, he barely got like any minutes basically. And then, like you said, just kind of thrown out there with all the injuries. He was forced to play. And then he played incredibly well, especially once he started starting towards like the midpoint of the year. He was like a walking 12, 5, and 5. And I feel like that really shows the versatility of a player like him. And I'm a big guy of, I value versatility a lot. And I feel like now he's still going to be able to be impactful, even though you have guys like Ja and Desmond, Marcus Smart all back. These guys are going to be taking shots away from other players on the team. So even though Vince isn't going to be like scoring or anything, he could still rebound the ball well. You touched upon his playmaking that he could play, the defense. He does a lot of the little things on the court, and I have high confidence that he'll be a pretty key contributor this season, even though now you guys are back to being a contending team.
Yeah, and I think he'll help shooting too. I really think like another guy that I feel like off the catch had a very good year shooting the basketball, and even had some good self-creation moments where like I'm comfortable with him, coming off the bench and creating for himself, because I think he got to the rim very, very well throughout the year. So it's like I'm very happy to see like either he starts at a 3 or if he comes off the bench, I'm very happy to see his minutes next year.
Yeah, either way, I definitely think it's kind of like the blessing in disguise of all those injuries
Yeah.
that you can have these guys kind of flourish and get a chance to really grow their game. And then now he'll be able to contribute to winning. Speaking of winning, with this next season coming up, you guys are all going to be healthy to start off the year at least. Hopefully it stays like that throughout the whole season. But what are your expectations for the Memphis Grizzlies this season?
It's interesting. I want to say, before obviously the injury, we're the 2 seed, 50 wins. And I feel like we've gotten better since then, but so is the West. So it's difficult. I would like to see top 5 seed playoff team. I think we can do it, and I think if everybody's healthy, I think we should do it. I want to win a playoff series as a fan, obviously, but I feel like we can, depending on the matchup. But again, going through Dallas, Denver again, even though I think Denver's got a little worse. OKC looks like in my opinion, the Western Conference frontrunner. So there's a lot of tough teams to go through. But I think for this year, I want to see get back to, even if it is just maybe getting to the second round again, I just want to see if there's something there that we have a chance to win a championship. I'm okay with not winning a championship this year. I just want to see us get back to what we were before, obviously, the injuries and everything else.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, with the West being so deep, like you said, it's going to be tough to go through. But I do feel like some people did slightly forget about the Grizzlies. Obviously last year they weren't in the playoffs at all. This year coming back though, I think they could make some noise for sure.
I hope so. It'd be nice. That 2022 season playing the Warriors in the playoffs was the most fun I've had as a fan in a minute. So I would love to get back to those heights.
For sure, man. I appreciate you coming on. For those of you who don't follow him already, his Twitter is linked in the description below. All Memphis Grizzlies fans, make sure you follow him on Twitter. Thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
And now it is time for my ceiling, floor, and expectation of the Memphis Grizzlies. Starting off with their ceiling, I could see them being just bouncing right back to where they were before all the injuries and being a top 3 seed out west. I am really, really confident in their defense. I think that they will solidify, definitely have a top 5 defense in the NBA next season. You could quote me on that. And when you pair an elite defense with an elite level player like Ja Morant, I'm very confident that he's going to be able to just win some games just based off of Ja being on the court alone. He is that good of a player. And then when it comes playoff time, I could definitely see them winning a first round matchup. When it comes to that second though, that's when it's just straight heavy hitters out west. They have a lot of top end teams here. So I don't know if they would be able to make it too far in the playoffs. But at their ceiling, I feel like they could make the Western Conference Finals. Then for the floor, I can see them being as low as the 6th seed. Like I said, there's so many top end talents out west. When you just list them off real quick, the Thunder, the Grizzlies, the Nuggets, the Mavericks, there's a lot of those top end teams that I could just see being better than the Grizzlies throughout the regular season. That's not a slight to the Grizzlies. But then when it comes playoff time and you're looking at the seeding, that means that they would have to verse one of those top end teams and give an upset to move on. and I don't know how confident I would really be for that. So at their floor, I can see them being a very competitive first round exit. My expectations for the Grizzlies, though, is probably in that 4 or 5 range. I feel like no matter what, they could be home, they could be away, but they're gonna be in that really tough first round matchup of that 4-5 matchup. And my expectations and the ceiling of the Grizzlies are relatively close, I would say. It's just really when it comes down to it, it could be a 3-game difference between the 1 seed and the 5th seed. So that could really just be what it is. But in the playoffs for the Grizzlies, it is going to be very hard to make it out the first round out west. And I do think that they will be very competitive no matter what series they're in against whoever it is. I think it's going to go either 6 or 7. I could see them maybe scraping out a first round matchup. But honestly, when I look at expectations, I don't know if I really see them making it. What about you guys, though? Let me know in the comments below where you think the Grizzlies will end in this year's standings. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. In the description, there's links to all my social medias, so make sure you follow me on all those to keep up to date with me. Catch y'all.